They banned me from my son's wedding because I was bad luck. Those words still burn my throat like acid every time I utter them. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for a second, feel like this seems familiar, I just ask you to leave a like and subscribe. It will help me keep venting. I'm Eleanor Ellie Hope Miller. I'm 71 years old, and I live in the heart of Chicago, in a classic Bridgeport 2 flat I bought 30 years ago with the sweat of my brow and a lifetime of sacrifice. The sturdy brick walls still hold the faint aroma of fresh pan dulce and dark roast coffee I used to sell in the mornings, when the sun barely peeked between the maple trees on Blue Island Avenue. My fingers, stained with flour and coffee, know every crack in these walls. Every dollar I invested in this family inheritance came from waking up before dawn to stand in front of the griddle, from afternoons counting dimes and nickels on the kitchen table, from a fortune built coin by coin, customer by customer, dream by dream. It was a Tuesday in October that time of year when Chicago dresses up in golden colors and the air smells like damp earth. I was sitting in my living room, the same room where I had breastfed my 3 children, where I had mourned the death of my husband Richard, where I had celebrated every Thanksgiving for 3 decades. I held a white linen napkin in my hands, embroidering small marigold flowers with golden thread. Every stitch was a prayer. Every flower a wish for the wedding of Sebastian, my eldest son. I had bought 20 yards of the finest cloth in the fabric district downtown. I had invested part of my capital in hiring the best local seamstresses to help me. I wanted the guests to take home something special, something that reminded them that a mother's love is priceless. The phone rang with that urgency that old devices retain, a metallic chime that sliced through the afternoon silence like a knife. On the screen appeared the name I loved most in this world. Seb. My heart filled with joy. My firstborn, the child I had carried in a sling while selling bagels near the L train station. The young man who had studied business thanks to the savings I kept for 15 years in an old Folgers coffee can, now a successful man with a prosperous electronics import business. Seb, my love. How are you, honey? His voice sounded strange, distant, as if he were speaking from the bottom of a well. Mom, I need to talk to you about the wedding. My smile widened. I thought he wanted to consult me about the final details. Maybe the menu, or the music, or the table arrangements. He had always included me in the important decisions of his life. Of course, my angel. Tell me everything. Have you decided if you're going to hire a live jazz band? Because I know the Lakeshore lads and I assure you they— Mom, don't come. The words fell on me like stones. The embroidery slipped from my hands. What did you say, son? A heavy silence, dense as the winter fog rolling in from the lake. It's just— Look, it's nothing personal against you. But Victoria thinks your presence might bring bad luck to our marriage. She says you have a very heavy energy, very dense, and we don't want any drama or bad vibes that day. I felt as if my heart had been ripped out with bare hands. The world became liquid, unstable, as if reality itself was crumbling beneath my feet. Bad luck? Me? Mom, understand me. I'm not saying it directly, but you know how things ended with Dad. He died and you're always alone. It's like, I don't know how to explain it. Like you carry baggage that we don't want on our special day. Victoria says widowed women bring energies of sadness and that it could affect our future. Every word was a knife plunging deeper into my chest. How did things end with Dad? Richard had died of cancer after a 2-year fight. 2 years in which I had sold even my wedding ring to pay for his treatments. 2 years in which I had turned our room into a hospital. In which I had learned to manage IVs and medications. In which I had taken out a second mortgage on my house to give him a dignified death. Sebastian, do you really believe I bring bad luck? The pause stretched into an eternity. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock I had bought at an antique shop the day he was born. That clock which had marked every important moment of our lives. Mom, I don't want to hurt you, but, well, yeah. Something always goes wrong when there are family gatherings. When you come to dinners, someone ends up arguing. When you organize the holiday parties, it rains. It's like, I don't know. Like you don't fit in with what we want for our lives now. My hands trembled. The embroidered napkin fell to the floor, getting stained with the tears that began to roll down my cheeks like rivers of salt and bitterness. I understand, I mumbled with a thread of a voice. I understand perfectly. And I hung up. The phone went silent, but my head roared as if a hurricane was raging inside. I remained seated in that living room where I had built a family, where I had invested the best years of my life, where I had accumulated not only material possessions, but memories, love, sacrifices. I looked at the photographs on the mantelpiece. Sebastian at 5, missing his front teeth, hugging me after his first school play. Sebastian at 15, in his high school uniform that I had paid for by working double shifts. Sebastian at 25, the day he opened his business, kissing my cheek while I smiled with infinite pride. When had I started being a curse instead of a blessing? When had my mother's love turned into heavy energy? When had my years of sacrifice transformed into bad luck? The house filled with a silence that was not peace, but emptiness. A silence that screamed all the truths I hadn't wanted to see, all the signals I had ignored, all the times my own children had begun to see me not as the woman who gave them life, but as a bother who had to be tolerated. That night, for the first time in 71 years of existence, Eleanor Hope Miller understood that there are wounds that can only heal when you stop trying to cure them with unreciprocated love. And at that moment, something very deep inside me began to change forever. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed seated in the kitchen until the sky began to lighten, watching the hours pass on the clock as my mind reviewed every moment, every sacrifice, every dollar I had given to my children, believing I was building a united family. When did it all begin? When did I stop being mom to become an ATM with feelings? I remembered when Sebastian was 8 and got pneumonia. I was working then cleaning offices in the Loop, leaving my house at 5 in the morning and returning past 10 at night. When the doctor told me he needed expensive medicines, I sold my only gold ring, an heirloom from my grandmother, without thinking twice. For 3 weeks I slept in a chair next to his bed, giving him medicine every 4 hours, bringing him chicken soup I prepared during my breaks. When he finally recovered, he hugged me and said, "You're the best mom in the world." Where did that child who saw me as his hero go? I went to my bedroom and pulled out an old shoebox from under the mattress, the one where I kept all the receipts, all the check stubs, all the evidence of the money I had given my children over the last 15 years. It was my small personal accounting, my silent record of everything I had invested in their dreams. I spread the papers on the kitchen table like playing cards. Receipt after receipt, transfer after transfer. Sebastian's private university, $340,000. The car I bought him when he graduated, $180,000. The rent for the condo where he lived, $8,000 a month for 3 years. The initial capital for his import business, $250,000 I took from my retirement fund. And then there was Patricia, my middle daughter. Her graphic design degree, $280,000. The special computer she needed, $35,000. The study trip to Europe that she said was indispensable for her education, $95,000 that I got by taking out a loan against my house. And finally, Michael, the youngest. His private high school because in the public one, he wouldn't learn anything, $120,000. Private English lessons, $45,000. The car he crashed 2 months after I bought it, another $150,000 to repair it. In total, I had invested almost $2 million in their lives. $2 million that I had earned selling food on the streets, cleaning other people's houses, getting up at 4 in the morning to make tortillas that I sold at the local farmer's market. But they weren't just numbers. Behind every dollar was a story of pain, of sacrifice, of sleepless nights. I remembered when Patricia graduated, and I couldn't go to her ceremony because I had to work. I needed those $500 for the day to pay the rent for her student apartment. She yelled at me that I was an absent mother, that I was never there when she needed me. But how could I explain that my absence was the price of her presence at that university? I remembered when Michael turned 18 and organized a party at a fancy venue. I arrived straight from work, in my cleaning uniform, smelling of disinfectant. His friends looked at me with that mix of pity and disgust that young people reserve for poverty. Michael came closer and whispered, "Mom, why didn't you change? It's embarrassing for them to see you like this. It's embarrassing for them to see you like this." Those words had pierced my heart like splinters, but I had justified them by telling myself it was normal, that young people are embarrassed by their parents, that he would get over it. But he never got over it. None of the three ever looked at me the same way again. When Richard died, I expected my children to draw closer, to understand that now I was the one who needed care, the one who needed company. But Sebastian was too busy with the business. Patricia was building her career. Michael was focused on his studies. Family Sundays became sporadic. Phone calls were reduced to requests. "Mom, can you lend me money for..." "Mom, I need you to help me with..." "Mom, it's urgent. I need cash for..." And I always said yes. I always found a way. I always sacrificed something of mine to give them what they asked for. When Sebastian met Victoria, a North Shore trust fund girl whose dad owned a real estate firm, I noticed how his manner of speaking to me changed. I was no longer my mom, but Eleanor. He no longer introduced me as the woman who gave me everything, but as the lady who used to make bagels. The first time Victoria came to my house, I saw the look of horror on her face when she entered. She looked at the brick walls, the simple furniture, the family photographs in cheap frames. She whispered something to Sebastian, and he told me afterward, "Mom, maybe it would be better if, when we visit, we meet at a restaurant." The house is very modest for Victoria. Modest. My house was modest. The house I had paid for dollar by dollar. The house where I had raised 3 successful professional children. The house that represented 30 years of honest work was modest for a girl who had never worked a day in her life. But the most painful part wasn't Victoria's words. It was seeing how Sebastian adopted them, how he started to be ashamed of me, of my accent, of my rough hands, of my way of speaking without a college education. I remembered the last Christmas dinner, just 8 months ago. Victoria had insisted on cooking, so Eleanor could rest. She prepared a complicated gourmet roast using expensive ingredients she had learned from a YouTube recipe, ingredients I never bought. Throughout the dinner, she talked about the trips she had taken around Europe, the fine restaurants she knew, the designer brands she wore. I stayed quiet, feeling how I was becoming invisible at my own table. When they left, I found the special homemade chicken and vegetable casserole I had brought in the trash, whole, untouched, still wrapped in the foil I had purchased at the farmer's market. That night, I cried like I hadn't cried since Richard's death, but it wasn't pain over wasted food. It was pain over understanding that my children no longer wanted anything that came from my world, from my history, from my heart. Now, sitting in my kitchen with all those receipts spread out before me, the reality hit me with brutal clarity. I hadn't raised grateful children. I had raised consumers. I hadn't built a family. I had financed 3 strangers who shared my blood, but not my heart. The phone rang. It was Patricia. "Mom? I heard about Sebastian's wedding." For a moment, my heart filled with hope. Maybe she was calling to defend me, to tell me it was an injustice, that she would be on my side. "Honey, thanks for calling. You don't know how..." "Mom, honestly, I think Sebastian is right." The world stopped. "What?" "It's just, I don't know how to tell you without hurting you, but whenever you're at gatherings, the atmosphere gets heavy. You talk about sad things, about when we were poor, about Dad and his illness. It's like you can't enjoy anything without reminding us of everything you suffered for us." "But honey, I never..." "Besides, Mom, Victoria comes from a different family. They're used to a different type of event, more elegant. Maybe it's better if you stay home this time." She hung up without saying goodbye. My hands trembled as I dialed Michael's number. Surely he, my baby, the one I had carried in my arms until he was 5, would understand. He didn't answer the first call, nor the second, nor the third. On the 4th, he answered with an annoyed voice. "What's the deal, Ma? I'm busy." "Son? Did you hear about the wedding?" A long, tired sigh. "Yeah, I know. Look, it's their wedding. They can invite whoever they want. Don't make a drama." "Drama? I'm making drama?" "Mom, you always do this. When you don't like something, you start with how you sacrificed for us, how you gave everything, how we don't appreciate you. It's exhausting. Exhausting. Loving them was exhausting. Michael, I am your mother. Yes. And I appreciate everything. But we're adults now. We don't need you to constantly remind us how much you spent on us." He hung up too. I was left alone in that kitchen, surrounded by receipts that told the story of a love that had been misinterpreted as obligation, of a devotion that had been seen as emotional blackmail. For the first time in my life, I understood that I had made the biggest mistake a mother can make. I had loved so much that I had forgotten to teach them how to love back. That morning, as I gathered the papers and put them back in the box, I made a decision that would change everything forever. The decision I made that morning was simple but radical. I was going to stop looking for the love they weren't giving me and start valuing the love I had left to give. But life had other plans for me. The following days passed in a nebula of silent pain. I woke up, made my coffee, looked out the window at the garden where the begonias Richard had planted were growing, and tried to understand how I had arrived at this point in my existence. On Friday morning, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Mrs. Miller?" "Yes, that's me. This is Linda Harrison from the Grand Ballroom. I'm calling because there's a problem with the payment for your son Sebastian's wedding banquet." My heart raced. "What kind of problem?" "Well, ma'am, young Sebastian told us you would be taking care of the banquet costs. That's $95,000 that should have been paid already. The wedding is in a week, and we need to settle the account." The world swayed beneath my feet. Sebastian had committed my money without consulting me. After banning me from his wedding, he had assumed I would pay for the party. "Excuse me, did my son tell you I would pay?" "Yes, ma'am. In fact, he gave us your phone number as a payment reference. He said you always take care of the important family expenses." I hung up without answering. My hands trembled as I dialed Sebastian's number. "Hello? Sebastian, why did you tell the venue I would pay for the banquet?" An uncomfortable silence. "Mom, I needed to give a payment reference. I thought that—" "You thought what? That after banning me from your wedding, I was going to pay for the party I can't attend?" "Mom, don't dramatize. You know you've always helped us with these kinds of things. It's natural that—" "Natural? Is it natural that you use me as your personal bank while you treat me like a pariah?" "Look, Mom, if you don't want to help, just say so. But don't make this a show." Show. My pain was a show to him. "I'm not going to pay a single dollar, Sebastian." The silence that followed was more eloquent than any scream. "Seriously, Mom, are you really going to ruin my wedding over a tantrum?" Tantrum. That's what he called the greatest humiliation of my life. "Your wedding is already ruined, son. You ruined it when you decided your mother wasn't worthy to be there." And I hung up. But the nightmare was just beginning. On Saturday morning, while watering my plants, I saw an unfamiliar car park in front of my house. It was a black, gleaming Cadillac Escalade, the kind I could never afford. An elegant woman, dressed in expensive clothes, got out of the car and walked towards my door with the assuredness of someone accustomed to getting her way. It was Victoria. She rang the doorbell once, impatiently. When I opened the door, she looked me up and down with a false smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning, Eleanor. Can we talk?" "Come in," I replied, although every fiber of my being screamed at me not to let her enter. She sat in my living room as if evaluating a property for sale. Her eyes scanned my modest furniture, my family photographs, the old television Richard had bought years ago. "Eleanor, I've come to talk to you woman to woman," she began with a sickly, sweet voice. "I know you're upset about the wedding, but I want you to understand that it's nothing personal against you. Banning me from seeing my son get married isn't personal. It's just, look, I come from a different family. We're used to a certain type of event, a certain level of elegance. The truth is, we need everything to be perfect for the photographs, for the videos, for our guests. Elegance. I lacked elegance. Besides," she continued, "Sebastian told me you have some financial difficulties, that your house is leveraged, that you work selling food on the street. We thought you might not have the right attire for such a formal event." The blood rushed to my head. Financial difficulties? Sebastian had told her I had money problems? What exactly did my son tell you? "Well, that you're a hard-working woman, very sacrificial, but that you don't have the resources to participate in events like these. That you prefer to stay in your environment, with people of your level, my level. I wasn't at the right level to see my own son get married. But I didn't just come to explain that. Victoria continued. I also came to make a deal with you. She pulled a white envelope from her handbag. Here is $20,000. It's for you to pay the wedding banquet. I know Sebastian already spoke to you about it. The envelope lay on my coffee table like a physical slap. And in exchange, we just need you to sign this. She pulled out a printed sheet. It was a document where I renounced any claim to Sebastian's assets, where I declared that I had never invested money in his education or business, where I committed not to interfere in their marriage. What is this? It's just a formality, Eleanor, to protect our future assets. You know how mothers are. Sometimes they get demanding with their successful children. Demanding. That was me. A demanding mother. My dad is a lawyer, she continued to explain. He advised me that it was better to make everything clear from the start. You sign this, you keep the $20,000, you pay the banquet, and everyone is happy. I read the document with mounting horror. 30 years of my life were summarized on one page as if they were lies. As if I had never paid for Sebastian's university. As if I had never given the money for his business. As if my love were an invention designed to blackmail him. And if I don't sign? Victoria's smile turned cold as ice. Well, then you'd have to explain why you ruined your own son's wedding. Sebastian has already told the whole family that you offered to pay for the banquet. If you back out now, they'll think you're a selfish mother who only wants to hurt her son because she wasn't invited. It was a perfect trap. If I didn't pay, I'd look like the evil mother who ruined the wedding out of spite. If I paid, I validated their version that I was an intruder in their lives. Besides, she added, playing her final card, if you don't sign this, Sebastian will have to cut off contact with you completely. We can't allow our marriage to start with family conflicts. Cut off contact completely. My son was willing to erase me from his life if I didn't submit to this humiliation. I need time to think about it, I said with a trembling voice. There's no time, Eleanor. The wedding is in a week. The banquet has to be paid for today. You either sign now and help us, or Sebastian will understand that you prefer to hurt him rather than support him. She stood up, smoothed her expensive skirt, and looked at me with feigned pity. Think about it carefully. You already lost your husband. Do you really want to lose your son too? When she left, I remained seated, staring at the envelope with the money and the document. $20,000 in exchange for my dignity. $20,000 for me to sign my own humiliation. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed awake, understanding that the woman who had raised my son had turned him into someone capable of emotionally blackmailing me, of using me financially, and of erasing me from his life if I didn't submit to her conditions. For the first time in my life, Eleanor Hope Miller wondered if it was worth continuing to fight for a love that had ceased to exist. At dawn, I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't dialed in years. It was time to talk to the only person who could help me understand what to do. My sister, Elaine, the only one who had always told me truths I didn't want to hear. Elaine? It's Eleanor. I need to see you urgently. What's wrong, sis? I think I just realized I don't have children anymore. And for the first time in a week, those words didn't sound like a tragedy. They sounded like a liberation. Elaine arrived at my house 2 hours after my call. She hadn't changed much in recent months. The same short gray hair, the same direct gaze that didn't tolerate lies, the same way of walking that said, I haven't come to comfort you. I've come to tell you the truth. She sat in the kitchen, refused the coffee I offered her, and looked at me with those eyes that had known me since childhood. All right, Eleanor. Tell me everything. And I mean everything, not the sugar-coated version you give your market friends. I told her everything from Sebastian's call to Victoria's visit. Elaine listened without interrupting, but I saw her expression harden with every detail. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Do you know what your problem is, sister? Besides having ungrateful children? Your problem is that you confused being a mother with being a martyr. And they confused having you as a mother with having you as an employee. Her words hurt because they carried the sharp edge of truth. Elaine, I only wanted to give them the best. No, Eleanor, you wanted to buy their love. And when you buy love, what you get are clients, not children. I remained silent, feeling how every word was piercing my chest. What do you think I should do? Elaine smiled. but it wasn't a kind smile. Give them the most important lesson of their lives. Teach them what it costs to live without you. That afternoon, Elaine accompanied me to the bank. I carried all the documents with me. The joint accounts, the extra cards, the insurance policies where my children were listed as beneficiaries. For years I had maintained these accesses just in case, for emergencies, because I'm their mother. I want to cancel all the extra credit cards linked to my account, I told the bank executive. Are you sure, Mrs. Miller? Some of these cards have years of credit history. Completely sure. One by one, I canceled Sebastian's, Patricia's, and Michael's cards. Then I closed the joint accounts where they had access to my savings. Finally, I changed all the beneficiaries on my life insurance policies. The executive looked at me with curiosity, but Elaine gave him one of those looks that paralyze indiscreet questions. I also want to revoke the authorization my son Sebastian has to access my safety deposit box, I added. In that box were the house documents, some tech stocks I had bought as an investment following a neighbor's advice, and the few valuable jewels I had left. Sebastian had had access since Richard died, in case something happened to me. When we left the bank, I felt strangely light, as if I had let go of a weight I had been carrying without realizing it. Now for the interesting part, Elaine said. You're going to see who cares about you and who cares about your money. I didn't have to wait long. On Monday morning, while I was having breakfast in my kitchen, the calls started. The first was Patricia, and her voice sounded hysterical. Mom, what did you do? My card was declined at the supermarket. Good morning, honey. How did you sleep? Don't good morning me. You canceled my card without telling me. I'm buying groceries for the whole week. Uh-huh. And? How can you say and? I need that card. I have expenses. Patricia, did you call me to ask how I was after I was banned from your brother's wedding? An awkward silence. Mom, that's different. No, honey, that's exactly the same. You decided I wasn't necessary in your lives. Well, now you're going to find out what it feels like to live without me. You're crazy. You can't do this. Of course I can. It's my money, Patricia. My assets. My years of work. But you've always helped us? Yes, and look how you thank me for it. I hung up. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. Michael. Ma, what the heck? Why did you cancel my card? What the heck? Is that how you talk to me, Michael? I'm mad. I was going to pay my tuition and the card was rejected. You made me look bad in front of everyone. I made you look bad? Like you made me look bad when you didn't answer my calls? Like when you said loving me was exhausting? Mom, that was different. No, son, it wasn't different. It was exactly the same. You've been making me look bad for months, and I kept giving you money. Now you're going to learn to live on your own effort. Are you serious, Ma? I have expenses. I have commitments. And I have dignity. Something you've been taking away from me little by little. I hung up on him too. The third call was the most interesting. Sebastian. But this time he didn't sound like the demanding son who had banned me from his wedding. He sounded scared. Mom, we need to talk. Of course, son, talk. Is it true that you canceled all the cards and closed the accounts? It is. But why? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? After years of, what am I going to do? Now it was, what are we going to do? You're going to do what you've been doing, Sebastian. Live without your mother. Mom, don't be like that. We can fix this. Fix what? Are you going to let me come to your wedding? A long silence. Mom, that's already decided. But we can talk about everything else. There's nothing else to talk about, son. You made your decision, I made mine. But the banquet, the venue is waiting for the payment. There it was. The real concern. Not my pain, not my loneliness. The banquet. That's your problem, Sebastian. You and Victoria can pay for it with your own money. We don't have $95,000 free. All our capital is invested in the business. Well, uninvest, or borrow money, or do what normal people do when they want something they can't afford. Work to get it. Mom, please. You can't do this to us. Do this to them. As if I were the villain in the movie. Do you know what you can't do, Sebastian? You can't treat me like trash and expect me to keep financing your life. You can't ban me from seeing your wedding and then demand that I pay for it. You can't disrespect me and then cry because I cut off your money. But you don't understand. If we don't pay for the banquet, they'll cancel everything. They'll ruin my wedding. Your wedding is already ruined, son. You ruined it when you decided your mother wasn't worthy to be there. This time, I was the one who hung up without saying goodbye. Elaine, who had been listening from the living room, walked into the kitchen with a smile I hadn't seen in years. How does it feel, sister? Like I've been holding my breath for years and can finally exhale. That afternoon, I received a text from Patricia. A long message, full of typos and exclamation points, where she explained that I was a selfish mother who was destroying the family over a tantrum. I replied with a single sentence. When you learn to speak to me with respect, we can talk. Michael sent me a 5-minute voice message yelling at me, calling me a crazy old woman and threatening never to speak to me again. I replied, perfect. That will save me a lot of money. But the reaction that impacted me the most came that night. A call from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Miller, this is Linda from the Grand Ballroom. Yes? Well, I wanted to let you know that your son came in this afternoon with a very agitated young lady. They were yelling at each other at the reception desk. In the end, they told me they were canceling everything. Canceling the wedding? Yes, ma'am. They said they couldn't afford to pay. Honestly, I felt bad for the young man, so desperate. But accounts are accounts, right? After hanging up, I sat in my living room, thinking about what had just happened. Sebastian had canceled his wedding. He hadn't found the money for the banquet. For a moment, I felt a pang of maternal pain. My baby was suffering. My firstborn was going through the greatest humiliation of his life. But then I remembered his words. You don't fit in with what we want for our lives. And the pang of pain transformed into something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Elaine was right. For decades, I had confused being a mother with being a martyr. I had believed that love meant unilateral sacrifice, that being a good mother meant disappearing so that my children could shine. But that night, for the first time in 71 years, Eleanor Hope Miller realized that she also deserved to shine, and that maybe, just maybe, it was time to start doing it. The following days were like living in a new world. For the first time in decades, my phone didn't ring every 2 hours with requests for money. For the first time in years, I didn't have to check my bank account wondering how much my children had spent without telling me. Elaine stayed with me that first week, not because I asked her to, but because she decided to. To make sure you don't backslide when the guilt starts, she said with her usual brutal honesty. On Tuesday morning, I woke up without that heavy feeling in my chest that had been my companion for so many years. I got up, made my coffee as always, but for the first time in a long time, I sat down to drink the whole cup instead of rushing to check if someone needed something from me. Do you know the last time I saw you eat breakfast in peace? Elaine asked me, sitting across from me. No, 15 years ago. Since Sebastian started university and you started living dependent on what he needed. She was right. For 15 years I had eaten breakfast standing up, with the phone in one hand and the cup in the other, always ready to resolve some crisis of my children, always available to transfer money, to run errands, to fix problems they had created themselves. That morning, for the first time in a decade and a half, I ate breakfast sitting down, slowly, savoring every sip of coffee as if it were a luxury I had been denying myself. What do you want to do today? Elaine asked me. The question took me by surprise. What did I want to do? I didn't know. I had spent so much time doing what others needed that I had forgotten what I wanted. I don't know, I admitted. It's been so long since I've asked myself that. Well, today you're going to find out. We left the house without a fixed destination. Elaine drove her old Honda Civic through the streets of Bridgeport, and I dedicated myself to looking out the window as if I were seeing my own neighborhood for the first time. We passed the market where I had bought vegetables for 30 years, always in a hurry, always calculating how much I could spend so there would be enough for everyone. We passed the bakery where I used to buy the sweet rolls Michael liked, even though the sugar disagreed with me. We passed the pharmacy where I had bought medicines for everyone but myself. Stop here, I suddenly said. Where? At that bookstore. Elaine parked in front of a small used bookstore I had been seeing for years from the bus, but had never entered because I didn't have time for those things. Inside, it smelled of old paper and stories waiting to be discovered. There were sections I had never explored: romance novels, international cookbooks, gardening manuals, biographies of extraordinary women. I picked up a book at random. It was the biography of Frida Kahlo. On the back cover was a quote that hit me like lightning. "I hope the leaving is joyful, and I hope never to return." "Are you going to get it?" Elaine asked me. "Yes. And this one too." The second book was about women who had started new lives after 60. Women who had discovered that old age was not the end of dreams, but the moment to fulfill the ones they had postponed. When we got home, instead of making lunch for the whole family, as I had done for 30 years, I sat in my living room and opened the Frida book. Elaine made quesadillas for the two of us, and we ate while I read aloud the passages that struck me most. "Where you cannot love, do not linger," Elaine read from one of the chapters. "Do you think it's too late for me?" I asked her. "To start over? Eleanor, you're 71 years old, not 170. You have your health, you have money, you own your house. Half the women your age would want to be in your place." She was right. For years I had felt like a washed-up, useless woman who was only good for giving money and solving other people's problems. But the truth was that for the first time in decades, I had something I had lost: freedom. That afternoon I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my friend Sophie, the one who sold flowers at the market, just to talk. Not to ask for favors, not to talk about my children's problems, but simply to converse. "Eleanor? What a surprise. How are you, dear?" "Good, Sophie. Very good. Guess what? I wanted to invite you for breakfast tomorrow." "Seriously? We haven't had breakfast together in years." She was right. I had stopped seeing my friends because I was always busy with some crisis of my children, because I always had to be available in case they needed me. "Tomorrow at 9, at the corner diner on Centenary." "I'll be there." "Hey, Eleanor. You sound different. More content." After hanging up, I thought about those words. When had I stopped sounding content? When had my voice become that of an exhausted, worried woman, always carrying other people's problems? On Wednesday morning, as I got ready for breakfast with Sophie, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and had a revelation. The woman looking back at me from the glass looked rested. For the first time in years, I didn't have deep, dark circles. I didn't have that expression of permanent worry that I had worn on my face like a mask. I put on a blue dress I had saved for months, one of those I bought but never wore because why should I dress up if I'm only going to the market? I put on lipstick, a rouge I had bought on an impulse and never used. When I arrived at the diner, Sophie was already waiting for me. Her surprised face confirmed what I had seen in the mirror. "Eleanor, you look beautiful. What did you do?" "Nothing. I just dressed up a bit." "No, it's not that. You look, I don't know how to explain it, younger, like a weight has been lifted off you." During breakfast, I told her everything. Sophie listened with wide eyes, alternating between indignation and surprise. "I can't believe your children did that to you," she exclaimed when I finished telling her about the wedding. "After everything you did for them." "It's over, Sophie. The important thing is that now I know who they really are." "And what are you going to do now?" That was the million-dollar question. What was I going to do with the rest of my life? I don't know. But for the first time in years, I feel like I have options. Sophie was thoughtful for a moment. "You know what? My cousin Hope lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico. She always tells me there are a lot of women like us there, women who started new lives after 60. She says it's a beautiful place, full of art, of culture." Santa Fe, New Mexico. I had heard of the place but had never thought about visiting. It was one of those places I saw in magazines and thought, how nice, but it's not for people like me. "You think so? Eleanor, you have savings. You have life experience. You want to start over. What's stopping you?" What was stopping me? Habit, fear, the idea that women my age couldn't start new adventures. But something deeper was also stopping me. The hope that my children would change, that they would realize what they had lost and come looking for me with genuine remorse. As if reading my mind, Sophie put her hand on the table. "Eleanor, those kids are going to take years to realize what they lost. If they ever do, are you going to waste those years waiting for them?" That afternoon, when I returned home, Elaine was packing her things. "Are you leaving?" Yes, sister. My job here is done. I can see you won't backslide. How do you know? Elaine smiled and pointed towards the living room table. There were the 2 books I had bought, open and with marked pages. There was also a notebook where I had started writing down ideas, plans, dreams I had kept locked away for decades. Because you're alive again, Eleanor, and a living woman doesn't wait for others to value her life. That night, after Elaine left, I sat in my garden with a cup of tea and my notebook. I wrote a list of things I wanted to do, places I wanted to see, experiences I had denied myself for years, thinking they weren't appropriate for my age or situation. Learn to paint, travel alone, take dance classes, see the ocean, write my memoirs, learn another language, meet new people, fall in love with life again. When I finished the list, I realized that for the first time in years, I was making plans for me, not for others. For the first time in decades, I was investing my emotional energy in my own future, and it felt like waking up after a very long dream. 3 weeks after my awakening, when I had already started to get used to this new version of myself, the universe decided to test me. It was a Friday afternoon. I was in my garden, planting some petunias I had bought at the local garden center, when I heard familiar voices approaching my door, voices arguing in urgent whispers. I peered through the kitchen window and saw them, Sebastian, Patricia, and Michael, walking towards my house with the determination of someone coming to a battle they consider inevitable. Sebastian looked haggard. He had lost weight, had deep dark circles, and that expression of defeat that I knew so well because I had seen it in the mirror for years. Patricia was dressed more modestly than usual, without the designer labels she normally flaunted like trophies. Michael dragged his feet like a scolded teenager, even though he was 26. I took a deep breath. For 3 weeks I had mentally rehearsed this moment. I had imagined what I would tell them when they came looking for me, because I knew they would come. I knew them too well to believe they would accept their new reality without a fight. They rang the doorbell 3 times, impatiently. I waited a few seconds before opening, not to make them wait, but because I needed to center myself in the woman I had decided to be. When I opened the door, the 3 of them looked at me as if they were seeing a stranger. And perhaps they were right. The woman standing before them was no longer the same woman who allowed herself to be mistreated for love. "Hello?" I said simply. "Mom," Sebastian began, in a voice that tried to sound authoritative but cracked at the edges. "We need to talk to you." "Of course. Come in." I led them to the living room, but this time I didn't rush to offer them water, coffee, or something to eat as I had done automatically for 30 years. I sat in my favorite armchair and waited. The silence stretched uncomfortably. It was obvious they had planned this conversation, but now that they were here, they didn't know how to start. Finally, Patricia spoke. "Mom, we came to tell you that this has gone too far." "This? What do you mean by this?" "Your tantrum," Michael interrupted. "This fit you're throwing because you weren't invited to the wedding. Tantrum, fit. That's how they saw my decision to stop financing their lives. Did the 3 of you come all the way here to insult me?" I asked calmly. "We didn't come to insult you," Sebastian said. "We came to solve this problem like adults." "Perfect. I'm all ears." Sebastian cleared his throat as if he were about to give an important speech. "Look, Mom, we understand you might have felt hurt about the wedding. Maybe we didn't handle the situation in the best way. Maybe we didn't handle. As if it had been a collective mistake and not a deliberate decision to humiliate me. But you have to understand," Patricia continued, "that you can't punish us like this. We're your family." "Oh, really? Since when am I your family?" The question caught them off guard. "What do you mean, since when?" Michael asked. "You've always been our mom." "No, Michael. I've been your bank. I've been your employee. I've been your problem solver. But family? We haven't been family in a long time." "Don't be dramatic, Mom," Patricia said. "Just because we had a problem." "A problem?" I stood up from the armchair. "Banning me from seeing my son get married is a problem? Telling me I bring bad luck is a problem? Trying to blackmail me into giving up my rights as a mother is a problem?" The 3 looked at each other. It was obvious they hadn't expected me to know about the episode with Victoria and the document. "Mom," Sebastian said in a softer voice, "maybe Victoria went too far with that paper, but Maybe she went too far. Maybe. Sebastian, your fiancé came to my house, sat in my living room, and offered me money to sign my own humiliation. And you knew it. I didn't know that. Don't lie to me. Of course you knew. Where do you think she got the idea that I paid for your university? How did she know how much money I had invested in your business? You gave her all that information. The silence that followed confirmed my suspicions. And the worst part, I continued, wasn't that you humiliated me. The worst part was discovering that my own children had turned my love into ammunition to use against me. Patricia began to cry, but they were tears of frustration, not remorse. So, what do you want us to do? She sobbed. What did you expect from us? Nothing, I replied with a calm that surprised even me. I no longer expect anything from you. And that is the difference between the woman I was a month ago and the woman I am today. I sat down again, feeling strangely serene. For 30 years, I waited for you to love me the way I loved you. I waited for you to value me the way I valued you. I waited for you to treat me the way I treated you. But I got tired of waiting. But Mom, Michael said, we can fix this. We can start over. With what money? Patricia suddenly asked, showing her true concern. If Mom doesn't help us, how are we going to— There it is, I exclaimed. There's the truth. You didn't come to ask for my forgiveness. You didn't come because you missed me. You came because you need my money. Sebastian turned red with shame. Mom, it's not just about the money. Of course it is, son. It's only about the money. If tomorrow I declared bankruptcy, none of you would ever look for me again. None of them denied it. I stood up and walked to the desk where I kept my important documents. I pulled out a folder I had prepared especially for this moment. I want to show you something. I opened the folder and took out the papers I had been organizing over the past few weeks. My new will, the documents for the change of beneficiaries, the house deeds. These are the papers for my new will, I announced. As you can see, none of you are listed as heirs. Patricia gasped. Michael went pale. Sebastian looked at me as if I had just slapped him. What? Patricia whispered. You're going to leave everything to strangers? I'm going to leave everything to people who valued me as a person, not as a source of income. The house goes to a foundation that helps elderly women abused by their families. The savings go to university scholarships for young people who don't have parents to support them. And my few luxuries go to people who have been kind to me without expecting anything in return. You're crazy, Michael yelled. It's our money. We're your children. My money, I corrected. And you are my biological children. But you stopped being my children of the heart a long time ago. I put the papers back in the folder. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have things to do. The door is open. The three remained seated, unable to process what had just happened. Is that it? Sebastian finally asked. 30 years of relationship ends like this? No, son. 30 years of relationship ended the day you decided I wasn't worthy to see your wedding. This is just the paperwork. One by one, they got up and walked towards the door. In the doorway, Patricia turned around one last time. You're going to regret this, Mom. When you're old and alone, you're going to regret this. I smiled for the first time in the entire conversation. Honey, I'm already old. And I've been alone for years, surrounded by you. Now I'm going to try being alone with myself. And that's going to be much better company. When I closed the door behind them, I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel emptiness. I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. Complete freedom. After the confrontation with my children, something changed in the air of my house. It was as if the walls themselves had let out a sigh of relief. The room seemed wider, the colors brighter, the silence more welcoming. For the first time in 30 years, the silence was not absence. It was peace. The first thing I did the next day was call a travel agency near the Loop. For decades, I had walked past that window full of colorful brochures, imagining destinations I thought were out of my reach, not because of money, but because of obligations. Good morning, I told the young woman who helped me. I want to travel. That's wonderful. Do you have a destination in mind? Santa Fe, New Mexico. I want to see it. Excellent choice. For how many people? Just for me. The girl looked at me with curiosity. She was probably not used to seeing women my age planning solo trips. Is this your first time traveling alone, ma'am? It's the first time I'm doing a lot of things, I replied with a smile. I booked a full week at a charming boutique hotel in the historic Plaza District. A small, intimate hotel with rooms opening onto courtyards full of flowers. The kind of place I had never stayed because I had always preferred to save that money to give to my children. While waiting for the travel date, I began to transform my house. Not a major renovation, but small, yet significant changes. I took down all the photographs of my children from the walls, not out of resentment, but because I needed my space to reflect who I was now, not who I had been as a mother. In their place, I hung canvases I had bought at craft fairs over the years, but had never used because they looked too bold for a family home. A vibrant desert landscape, a piece of abstract art I had found at a street vendor, a mosaic mirror that made the whole living room look brighter. I also gave away clothes. Piles of clothes I had bought thinking about what my children would say, what they would expect of me, how I should look to fit into their lives. I kept only the pieces I genuinely liked, the ones that made me feel like myself. One afternoon, while organizing my closet, I found a red dress I had bought years ago in a burst of bravery, but had never dared to wear. Too flashy for a woman my age, I had told myself. I took it out, tried it on in front of the mirror, and for the first time in years, I liked what I saw. I was not the tired, resigned woman I had been. I was Eleanor Hope Miller, a 71-year-old woman who had finally learned to value herself. The day of the trip to Santa Fe dawned clear. I took the bus from the terminal, carrying a small suitcase with just the essentials. I wasn't carrying gifts for anyone. I didn't have to buy obligatory souvenirs. I didn't have to take photos to send to relatives who would feign interest. I was traveling for the pure pleasure of traveling. The landscape from the bus window unfolded like a promise. The endless plains, the distant Rockies on the horizon, small towns that looked like watercolor paintings. With every mile that separated me from Chicago, I felt lighter, as if I were leaving behind not just a place, but a version of myself I no longer wanted to be. Santa Fe welcomed me with narrow, winding streets that rose and fell like stone waves, adobe walls painted in soft earth tones, and gardens peeking over the walls like well-kept secrets. The air smelled of piñon smoke and cedar. My hotel was exactly what I had imagined, a historic building converted into a refuge for travelers seeking beauty and tranquility. My room looked out onto a central courtyard where a fountain whispered water songs, and the walls were decorated with local art that spoke of hands creating with love. That first night I dined alone in the hotel restaurant, something I had never done in my life. I ordered a glass of Cabernet, something I never allowed myself because why spend money on that when it's just me? The waiter, a kind young man, treated me with the courtesy reserved for special guests, without the hint of pity that sometimes accompanies older women who appear alone. "Is this your first time visiting Santa Fe?" he asked as he poured the wine. "Yes, and my first time traveling alone." "How exciting! You're going to fall in love with this place. It has a very special energy for new adventures." New adventures. At 71, I was having new adventures. The following days were a revelation. I walked through unfamiliar streets unhurriedly, without an itinerary, with no one to please but myself. I went into art galleries where I discovered that I had my own tastes and opinions about beauty. I visited artisan workshops where I learned about techniques that existed long before I was born. In a small gallery, I met Hope Rodriguez, a 65-year-old artist who had started painting after her divorce. "When did you start painting?" I asked her, admiring her canvases full of color and movement. "At 60, she replied with a smile. "My husband always said it was a waste of time. When he left, I realized he was right. It was a waste of time to live without doing what made me happy." Her words resonated in my chest like bells. "Did you never feel too old to start something new?" "Old?" She laughed. "Dear, old age isn't being 70. Old age is stopping dreaming, and I'm just starting to dream big." That afternoon, I signed up for a painting workshop that was starting the following week. Not because I had any special talent, but because I wanted to try something I had never done, something that was entirely mine. On Tuesday morning, while having coffee in a cafe on the main plaza, an older man approached my table. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" He was distinguished, with completely white hair and kind eyes. He was dressed simply but elegantly. Not at all. Please sit. He introduced himself as Roberto Sandoval, a retired architect who had decided to move to Santa Fe after being widowed. Are you from here? He asked me. No, I'm from Chicago. I'm getting to know the area. Do you like it? I love it. It has something liberating. Roberto nodded as if he understood exactly what I meant. This place saved my life. After my wife died, my children wanted me to move in with one of them, but I knew if I did that, I would become a burden. The grandfather who needs care. Here I became Roberto again. We talked for 2 hours about travel, books, movies we had seen, places we wanted to visit. We didn't talk about our children. We didn't complain about our families. We didn't exchange stories of sacrifices and disappointments. We simply enjoyed each other's company. When we said goodbye, Roberto invited me to accompany him to the community theater the next day. It's a local play, very good. If you're interested, I'd love to, I replied without hesitation. That night, as I got ready for bed, I realized I hadn't thought about my children all day. I hadn't wondered if they were okay, if they needed anything, if they missed me. For the first time in decades, I had lived a full day thinking only of myself, and it had felt wonderful. The theater turned out to be a magical experience. The play was about a woman who discovered her passion for music after 60. Roberto and I sat in red velvet seats, sharing popcorn like teenagers on a first date. During the intermission, as we walked through the foyer, Roberto took my arm with gallantry. Do you know what I like about you, Eleanor? What? That when you smile with your whole body, like you're just learning how to be happy. He was right. I was learning how to be happy. At 71, I was finally discovering what it felt like to live for myself. On the last day of my trip, I climbed alone to the lookout near the cathedral. From there, all of Santa Fe was spread out like a dream map. Adobe roofs, gold-domed towers, secret gardens peeking between the houses like promises of abundant life. I thought of the Eleanor who had arrived a week ago, a woman hurt, confused, who didn't know what to do with her newfound freedom. And I thought of the Eleanor who was leaving, a woman who had remembered she had a right to be happy. On the bus back to Chicago, I didn't feel sad about leaving Santa Fe. I carried something more valuable than memories with me, the certainty that my life could be whatever I decided it would be. When I arrived at my house in Bridgeport, everything looked exactly the same. But I had changed so much that it was like arriving at a completely new place. On my nightstand, I found several messages from my children on the phone. I didn't listen to them. I was no longer curious to know what they needed from me. Instead, I pulled out my notebook and started planning my next adventure. 6 months after that confrontation in my living room, 6 months after deciding that my life belonged only to me, I am sitting on the terrace of my new house in Santa Fe, watching the sunset paint the sky with colors I never thought existed. The house is small, perfect for one person. It has a central patio full of lavender and red chili ristras that I planted myself, a kitchen where I prepare food only for me, and a studio where I paint canvases that no one else has to understand. The walls are filled with my own works. They are not perfect, but they are mine, completely mine. Roberto comes to visit me 3 times a week. We cook together, go to the theater, walk the cobblestone streets holding hands like teenagers. Sometimes we make love with the tenderness of people who have learned that passion has no expiration date. Other times we just sit in silence, each reading our own book, enjoying a companionship that demands nothing except presence. We are not married. We don't live together. We have no plans for the future beyond the next trip we want to take together. And it is perfect that way. At 71, I have learned that love doesn't need contracts, only honesty. My days have a new rhythm. I wake up when my body wants to wake up, not when someone else needs something. I have breakfast on my patio listening to the birds singing in my bougainvillea. 3 times a week I go to my painting class, where I have discovered that I have a penchant for brightly lit landscapes. On Tuesdays, I help at a community center that teaches skills to older women who, like me, are starting new lives. My money, now that I don't have to support 3 irresponsible adults, is enough for small luxuries I once considered impossible. New books instead of used, good wine with dinner, fresh flowers on my table every week. It's also enough for true generosity. Scholarships for students who have no family support, donations to shelters for abused women, contributions to the foundation that helps mothers abandoned by their children. 3 weeks ago, I received a letter. The envelope carried the Chicago postmark, and I immediately recognized Patricia's handwriting. I held it in my hands for several minutes before deciding whether or not to open it. Finally, I opened it. "Mom," it began, "I know I have no right to write to you after everything that happened, but I need you to know that I've been thinking a lot about everything you said that day. At first, I was very angry with you. I thought you were being dramatic, that everything would be fixed once your temper cooled down. But 6 months have passed, and I understand more and more that you were right. Sebastian canceled his wedding to Victoria 2 weeks after our visit. He says he realized he didn't love her. He just wanted to impress her family with money that wasn't his. Michael had to drop out of university because he can't afford it without your help. And for the first time in his life, he's working a real job at an electronics store. I lost my job because I was late every day. I was used to you solving my problems, and when you were no longer there, I didn't know how to solve my own. I had to move to a smaller apartment. I had to learn to cook. I had to learn to live on my own money. At first, I hated you for abandoning us. But now I think I understand that you didn't abandon us. We abandoned you a long time ago. Mom, I know you may not want anything to do with us anymore, and I would understand. But if one day, someday in the future, you could forgive us, I would really like my daughter to meet the brave woman who gave everything to her children and who had the courage to teach them, even if late, what it meant to live without her. I am not asking you for money. I am not asking you to go back to being the way you were. I am just asking you to know that I do understand everything we lost when we decided you weren't enough for us. With love and remorse, Patricia. P.S. Sebastian and Michael wanted to write to you too, but I told them to respect your space. If you ever want to hear from us, my number is still the same. When I finished reading the letter, I didn't cry. I didn't feel the urge to run to the phone to call her. I didn't feel the automatic impulse to forgive everything and go back to being the mother who fixed other people's problems. I felt something more complex, a mixture of sadness for the lost years, pride for the woman they had been forced to become in my absence, and above all, peace in knowing that my decision had been correct. I put the letter away in a box along with other memories that no longer hurt me. Maybe one day I'll reply to them. Maybe one day I'll be curious to meet the granddaughter Patricia mentions. Maybe one day my children and I can build a new relationship, based on mutual respect instead of economic dependence. But if that never happens, that's okay too. Because for the first time in my life, my happiness does not depend on what others do or fail to do. For the first time in 71 years, I am the complete owner of my own life. This morning, as I was painting a landscape of the mountains that surround Santa Fe, Roberto asked me if I ever regretted the decision I made. "Do you mean stopping supporting my children?" "I mean choosing yourself." The question made me laugh. "Roberto, I regret many things in my life. I regret taking so long to value myself. I regret confusing being a good mother with being a martyr mother. I regret not teaching my children to love instead of just teaching them to receive." "But you don't regret leaving them?" "I didn't leave them, Roberto. I liberated them. And I liberated myself." This afternoon, as I write these reflections in my diary, I think of all the women who are currently living what I lived for decades, loving without being loved, giving without receiving, existing only for the function of others who have forgotten that they too deserve care. To those women, I want to say something that took me 71 years to learn. The love you have to beg for is not love. The companionship you have to buy is not companionship. The respect you have to negotiate is not respect. And it is never, ever too late to choose a life where you are the protagonist of your own story. For 30 years, I believed that a mother's love meant disappearing so that my children could shine. I believed my value was in my usefulness, that my importance was measured by how much money I could give them, how many problems I could solve for them, how many sacrifices I was willing to make. But true love, the love that heals and builds, is the one that teaches independence, not dependence. It is the one that celebrates autonomy, not need. It is the one that is happy when it is no longer indispensable, because that means it did its job well. My children needed to learn to live without me to appreciate what I had given, and I needed to learn to live without them to remember who I was before I became just Sebastian's mom. Now I am Eleanor Hope Miller. Not Sebastian's mom, not Richard's ex-wife, not the lady who sells bagels. I am a 71-year-old woman who paints brightly lit landscapes, who travels alone whenever she pleases, who falls in love with life every morning, who has turned her freedom into the most beautiful work of art she has ever created. The sun is setting behind the mountains, coloring my terrace in golds and roses. In a few hours, Roberto will come to have dinner with me. We have planned a trip to Oaxaca next month, just because we want to see its markets and try its food. Tomorrow I have painting class, and on Thursday I start a writing workshop. I want to write my memoirs, not as a complaint, but as a testimony that life can start at any age if you have the courage to leave behind what no longer serves you. Before closing this diary, I want to ask you, who have accompanied me in this story? Have you ever lived through something similar to what I did? Do you know someone who is sacrificing their happiness for unreciprocated love? If your answer is yes, tell me in the comments. Sometimes the only thing we need to find the courage to change our lives is knowing that we are not alone in our pain. And if this story touched your heart, if you feel you need to hear it, or that someone you know might need it, leave me a like and subscribe to the channel. Help me get this message to all the women who need to remember that it is never too late to choose themselves. Because in the end, the most beautiful story you can write is the story of your own liberation.